Thank you. You may be seated. Pastor Tandy from Quinault is going to read some scripture. Tandy, introduce yourself to Charlie.
Hi, I'm Pastor Tandy Charley from Tuhola, Washington, Quinault Indian Nation. Here to read the scriptures from Ecclesiastes 3. A time for everything. For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to embrace. A time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. And a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, and a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
Thank you, Tandy. We have a series of speakers, and our first speaker is former U.S. Representative Norm Dix. I know that I spent a few times with Norm and Billy and learned a lot from the two of these and how they interacted. And great leaders meet great leaders and great things happen. Norm?
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here today, and I want to offer my sympathy to Sugar, Tanu, and Willie, and the entire Frank family. I first met Billy Frank when I was a staff member for Senator Warren G. Magnuson. Now, Billy was already a very famous person because of his fish-ins. In fact, the president mentioned this in his statement in recognizing Billy's great role in tribal fishing history. He was always a leader, and he did his part to make sure that everyone realized that there were treaty fishing rights in the 1954 treaty between the United States and the Indian tribes of the Northwest, of the Governor Stevens, and that led to the Bolt decision. And the Bolt decision basically said that fishing in our state would be 50-50 between the tribes and the non-Indians, and that they would fish in common with at the off-reservation locations, famous language in the treaty, in common with. The Bolt decision, as we all know, was upheld by the United States Supreme Court, and is the way we operate the fishery here in Washington State is based on that, the co-manager doctrine. I supported Billy. Billy came to my office quite frequently. I happened to be on the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, and I was in a position where I could help Billy on his projects. And I always wanted to help Billy because with that personality, that warm smile, that charisma, how could you not want to help Billy Frank? And we worked together on a multitude of projects. The first one I can remember was the establishment of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. And that would be the centerpiece of Billy's work in the days ahead. We also did a hatchery on the Nisqually River. And, Billy came to me and he said, our fisheries people tell us that there is a piece of property just adjacent to the reservation that would be but it's in Fort Lewis, that would be a much better location. And why don't we work out a swap of land between the Army and the Nisquallys? So I took this to the commanding general, General Riscossi, and he went to the chain of command and found that the only way we could do it was legislation. So I said, Billy, you're going to have to come back here and make the case to the chairman of the Military Construction Subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee, an African-American named Ron Dellums from Berkeley. And I said, he's a very progressive guy. I'm sure he'll give you a warm welcome, and I'll go with you. So we went over to Chairman Dellums' office, and we made our presentation that we thought we could swap this land, but we were going to need legislation. And so Dellums looks at Billy and says, sir, are you asking me to take land away from the United States Army and give it to the Nisqually Indians? Billy nodded yes, and Dellums said, right on, brother. So, and we got the new hatchery. It's been fantastic. It has just been a tremendous success. And the Army actually sent over chairs and helped with the opening day event for the hatchery. So it was everything worked out just fine. The other project, of course, that we had great efforts to work together on was the Nisqually Delta, the restoration of the Delta. At one point, we were trying to give money to Mr. Braggett so that we could buy the land and take it over for the federal government. He said, I won't sell the land to the federal government. And I said, but who will you sell it to? Well, I'll sell it to Billy Frank and the Nisquallys. So that's how we did it. We gave the grant through the BIA to the Nisquallys, and we restored the Delta. And that was so important because it recreated about 30% of the estuary in Puget Sound. And one thing Billy cared about more than anything else were those little smolts going out to sea. He wanted to make sure they got out there and got out there safely. Billy's personality was just such a magnet for praise, and he would get up there. Now, once in a while, Billy used a little profanity. We all know that. But it was only to emphasize the point. So Billy would always, I'd hear this, Norm, we've got to do more about protecting our salmon runs and restoring the salmon runs. We need to clean up Puget Sound. We need to fix the culverts. We need to do all these things and to protect those smolts so they can get out. He was passionate. He cared. I've often said that no one cared more about planet Earth and the salmon here than our friend Billy Frank. Now, what can we do? We can honor Billy by finishing his work, protecting wild salmon. And what would Billy want us to do? One, he'd want us to respect the science. He wanted us to uphold the Bolt decision and the treaty rights. He wanted us to support, with Michael Graham's leadership, the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. And he would want us to tackle the problem of our time, climate change and ocean acidification. The planet is at risk. As we all know, Billy Frank is a legend, but we must ensure that his work is never forgotten. And I want to say one thing, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Billy Frank was the most constructive leader I've met in my lifetime. the planet Earth and our salmon runs never had a better friend than Billy Frank. Thank you.